But again, I just wish, I don't know how long you'll be in town, but it seems like there needs to be this more skillful way, because if activists go down there, and these are just regular folks out in a small town, they don't, there's already going to be this polarization, but if you could be subtle and go in there and get that message out, it could completely transform the discussion about the Bayshore expansion.
Well, let's talk about that type of stuff more after.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to take another step back in history to get a little more context. Here at the top of chapter 2, we talk about the Industrial Revolution. We show Virginia State House, which is built on a foundation of lumber, cotton, and coal, connected with this steam-powered textile mill. This was one of the industries that built up the economy in the 13 colonies. And I don't even remember what I usually say about this. Let's go to the next page. And up above it, we have this weird little thing. What's this?
Wagon train with a missile on.
A wagon train with a missile. Yeah. It's
what do you think this represents? Like the concept?
Expansion? Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. The
colonization of space.
Yeah. NASA's first space program was called the Pioneer program, right? So, and we want to use this to kind of poke our finger at this idea that progress in our society is synonymous with manifest destiny. This idea that progress means going where we want, taking what we want, making whatever we want out of it, and usually not really considering the consequences of these actions. And a perfect example of that type of mindset is the colonization of the Americas in general. And over here we show a few sort of generic scenes of that. What's this? Anybody want to call this out? What does this look like? Can you see it? I see people squinting.
Daffy Duck like a superhero.
Maybe you can't see it. So this is displacement. And here we show theft of the youth, taking them off to the settlement schools. And here we show colonizers bringing smallpox blankets, early forms of biological warfare. And we also talk in here about specific examples of how colonization played out in southern Appalachia. And so here we show the Trail of Tears in 1838 when Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, and tens of thousands of indigenous folks, mostly Cherokees, were forced they were sent on a forced march through the winter to Indian Territory, which is Oklahoma. Thousands and thousands of people died from cold and hunger and disease, and memories of this still linger in this area. So I just want to point out that there are certain themes that continue through this graphic. We see here with the Trail of Tears that there's this history of displacement. And over here with the bus stop, we see that displacement continues today in different forms. And we see over here with the coal camp that there's a history of extraction in this area. And we see with this drag line here that extraction is happening today as well in a very different form. Also, here with the union organizing scene, we see that there's a rich history of resistance in this region. And as we move into chapter 4, we see all the different ways that people are resisting today. Do you want to go?
So this, which is right here, for those of you who are in the back, is referencing the Highlander Center, and more than that, it's talking about community education. You see animals from land, water, and air gathering together. These are all species that are endangered in the area. The people who will be the species that will be most affected, and they're coming together to talk about the issues and brainstorm ways that they can react. And here we have a bunch of people getting ready for a protest. Can you guys see that over there? Right down there? What activities do you see here? Do any of these look familiar to some of you?
Sign making.
Yep. Sign making. There's a petition being signed. People are lighting candles for a vigil. and they're educating each other with little charts. And just above them, you see these outsider activists parachuting in with their various privilege and abilities. There's a little grad cap here. This rabbit also has a U-lock. And a laptop and a camera. Maybe they're going to do some indie media documentary. And the most important part of this scene is that below them there's another outsider activist, a rabbit, with these air traffic controller wands telling them where to land. And this character knows where they should land because it's listening to a native butterfly, to one of the elders, the community elders, so that they land in the right space without disrespecting all the work that has been put into it. We heard a lot of stories of, outsider activists are great, they're coming in here, they're doing things like water testing because they were able to go to school, blah, blah, blah. And then we also heard stories of, well, these activists came in and did this awesome action, lockdown or whatever, but then they left and the cops came to my house. So it's really important that if you're going to be an outsider activist, that you pay attention to the community you're going into. Here's some city animals. We've got a cockroach and a poodle and a squirrel, and they're doing lockdowns to stop this new coal truck. And here we see these paper airplanes flying through the scene from this paper renter, Millipede, who's going through all the permits and the legislation, backing them up by turning these in paper airplane hearing requests, which are gumming up the gears of the coal factory to buy these activists time to build community support. And the coal machine was coming in on a wave of money that's coming out of the ATM/Wall Street financiers. This slide is talking about, you can't really fight the coal companies directly because a lot of the time they'll dissolve after they're done with a site. They'll dissolve the company, sell all the shares, fire all the workers, then they'll reform under a new name with no history. So how do you fight that in a court, right? So what people are fighting are the financiers, the banks, the legislators. This is Capitol building, printing out all these permits. And of course the revolving door between the two of them. And in the middle we have
wacky, flailing, inflatable armed tube men, defined by Aaron.
So, at the used car lots with woo, right? The big tube men. And they got the fans under them. They're full of hot air. And these represent the big green organizations. And they're all bending over backwards to stamp the permits. Do you want to tell the story?
Sure. So we talk about not only the banks that are funding mountaintop removal and the regulators who have created legislation that has giant loopholes that make things like mountaintop removal legal and permitted, but also these big green organizations that are essentially greenwashing, right? Making this facade, distracting folks, and the big sort of wishy-washy, middle-of-the-road greens are especially people in southern Appalachia are especially suspicious of them, because in the 70s, when there was a very strong movement to abolish all strip mining, it was growing really rapidly, both in numbers and in volume and in intensity. Jimmy Carter said he was fully in support of it. And at the last minute, this coalition that included the Sierra Club, Natural Resource Defense Council, and a couple of other smaller groups stepped in and said, we'll negotiate this for you. We have all these hotshot lawyers who can get this all figured out. We can get some legislation passed for you. Folks agreed, and they went in and started working on some backroom deals that you can see here. And when the legislation came out, folks celebrated. It was called SMACRA, Surface Mining Control and Regulation. Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act, excuse me. And then they realized, wait a minute, this didn't abolish strip mining at all. It set up the Office of Surface Mining, this government agency, that these companies had to apply for a permit to be allowed to do things like mountaintop removal. It didn't, it just put one very small step in there.